Have you ever sat down to rest, like really rest, and suddenly felt a strange tightness in your chest? Your body finally stops moving, but your mind starts pacing. You think about unfinished tasks, unread messages, things you should be doing. You scroll your phone, not because you want to, but because doing nothing feels wrong. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet moment, guilt shows up uninvited. Not because you hurt someone, not because you made a mistake, but because you rested. If that sounds familiar, you're not lazy, you're not broken, and you're definitely not alone. What you're experiencing is something deeply psychological, deeply human, and surprisingly common, especially in a world that quietly trained your brain to believe that rest must be earned. Most of us grow up with a simple idea floating around in the background. Productive equals valuable. Busy equals important. Tired equals worthy. Rest, on the other hand, is treated like dessert, something you're allowed only after you've finished your plate, and even then, only a small portion. So when you finally stop moving, your brain doesn't feel relief, it feels danger. Because somewhere along the way, rest became associated with risk. Your brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly asking, what keeps me safe? What helps me belong? What makes me valuable? If for years your safety or approval came from being useful, helpful, or productive, your nervous system learned a quiet rule: stillness equals threat. Not because resting is bad, but because in your past, rest may have meant falling behind, disappointing someone, or losing control. Think about how early this can start. As a kid, praise often comes after effort. Good job follows achievement. I'm proud of you comes after performance. Rarely do we hear, I'm proud of you for stopping, or you did great by taking a break. So the brain connects love with output. Over time, that connection hardens. Rest stops feeling neutral. It starts feeling like failure. That's why guilt during rest doesn't feel logical. It feels emotional, heavy, vague. You can't point to what you did wrong, but your body acts like you did something wrong anyway. That's because guilt, in this case, isn't about morality. It's about identity. If you've built your sense of self around being productive, resting can feel like you're temporarily disappearing. There's also something else going on beneath the surface. Many people who feel guilty when resting are not driven by ambition alone. They're driven by fear. Fear of falling behind, fear of being forgotten, fear of becoming irrelevant. When you're always doing something, you don't have to sit with those fears. Motion becomes a distraction. Productivity becomes emotional armor. So when you stop, the armor comes off, and suddenly the silence is loud. Your brain doesn't like uncertainty. Rest creates space, and space invites thoughts you've been outrunning. Unanswered questions, unprocessed emotions, that awkward feeling of, if I'm not doing, who am I? Guilt becomes a convenient alarm. It pushes you back into motion. It says, get up, do something, anything. Not because rest is wrong, but because stillness reveals things you haven't had time or permission to feel. There's also a cultural layer to this. Modern life rewards visibility. If you're not seen working, it's as if the work doesn't exist. Hustle culture turns exhaustion into a badge of honor. People casually compete over who slept less, who's busier, who's more overwhelmed. In that environment, rest feels rebellious, almost irresponsible. Even when you know intellectually that rest is healthy, your emotional brain still whispers, but what if someone else is doing more than you right now? And here's the strange part. The people who feel the most guilty about resting are often the ones who need it the most. They're conscientious, self-aware, emotionally attuned. They notice responsibilities. They care deeply. Their guilt doesn't come from selfishness. It comes from over-responsibility, from carrying more than their share for too long. Your nervous system doesn't forget that. If you've been the reliable one, the strong one, the one who keeps going even when tired, rest can feel like betrayal, as if stopping means letting someone down, even if that someone is imaginary.
Psychologically, this is tied to something called conditional self-worth. That's when your sense of value depends on meeting certain conditions, being productive, being useful, being needed. When self-worth is conditional, rest threatens the condition, so guilt steps in to protect it. But here's the quiet truth your brain hasn't been told enough. Rest is not the opposite of productivity, it's the foundation of it. Your brain literally processes information, regulates emotions, and consolidates memory during rest. When you stop, your nervous system recalibrates, stress hormones decrease, creativity increases, problem solving improves. But guilt interferes with this process. It keeps your body in a half-on, half-off state. You're lying down, but you're not resting. You're paused, not restored.
That's why guilt-filled rest feels unsatisfying. You get up feeling just as tired, sometimes even more. Then you blame yourself for resting wrong, which adds another layer of pressure. It becomes a loop. You work to escape guilt. You rest and feel guilty. You work again to feel worthy. Breaking that loop doesn't start with forcing yourself to relax. That usually backfires. The brain doesn't respond well to commands like stop feeling guilty. It responds to safety, to permission, to understanding. One small shift is noticing the voice of guilt without immediately obeying it. Instead of jumping up the moment it says, you should be doing something, you pause and ask, what is this guilt trying to protect? Often, it's trying to protect your sense of value, your sense of control, your sense of belonging. When you see that, the guilt softens. It's no longer an enemy, it's a signal. Another shift is redefining rest in your mind, not as absence of effort, but as active maintenance. Just like charging a phone isn't laziness, resting your brain isn't weakness, it's upkeep. You wouldn't expect a car to run forever without fuel, yet somehow we expect our minds to function flawlessly on empty. It also helps to remember that rest doesn't erase your worth. You don't become less intelligent, less capable, or less meaningful when you stop moving. You are not only valuable when you're producing, you're valuable because you exist. That idea may sound simple, but for a brain trained in performance, it can feel radical. There's a deeper layer too. Sometimes guilt during rest is grief in disguise. Grief for the version of yourself that never learned how to rest safely. Grief for the years spent believing you had to earn peace. When you finally slow down, that grief surfaces. It can feel uncomfortable, even painful, but it's also a sign that something is healing.
Over time, as you practice resting without immediately punishing yourself for it, your nervous system learns a new association. Stillness stops meaning danger. It starts meaning safety, presence, choice. And the guilt, while it may not disappear overnight, loses its grip. It becomes quieter, less convincing. You may even start to notice something unexpected. When rest no longer feels like a crime, productivity becomes lighter, more intentional. You work because you choose to, not because you're running from guilt. Your energy feels cleaner. Your motivation feels less desperate. And maybe the most important shift is this. You stop measuring your life only by output. You start noticing how you feel while living it, how your body responds, how your mind breathes. You realize that a well-rested you is not a luxury. It's the version of you that thinks clearer, feels deeper, and connects more honestly. So if you feel guilty when resting, don't shame yourself for that either. That guilt tells a story of someone who learned to survive by staying useful, someone who equated motion with meaning, someone who hasn't yet been shown consistently that they are allowed to stop. Let rest be awkward at first. Let it feel unfamiliar. You're not doing it wrong. You're teaching your brain something new. And every time you choose to stay still just a little longer, even with guilt present, you're rewriting an old rule. You don't have to earn your right to rest. You already have it. And the more you honor that, the more your mind will slowly, gently learn to rest with you. If this felt personal, take a moment with it. You might even notice your body relaxing just a bit right now. And if you want to explore more of these quiet psychological patterns we rarely talk about, you know where to find this space again.